When I see images of Samara Weaving covered in blood, I know I might be in for an awesome ride. In a world where no one speaks, a devout female-led community hunts down a young woman who has escaped imprisonment. Recaptured, the woman is due to be sacrificed to an ancient evil in the wilderness, but fights for her own survival. So this is called Azrael or Azrael. I can't really say for certain because nobody ever says her name within the movie. The story takes place after the biblical rapture, and within a sect of those that were left behind, they've made themselves mute, to no longer be able to sin through their speech. Now, it's the MacGuffin, so you just kind of go with it. We meet this young woman in the forest. She's got a cross-shaped scar on her throat, presumably from where her vocal cords were severed. Now, I say presumably because that's also info that we're never provided with. I mean, it's a safe assumption, especially when we meet others who share that exact same scar and can't speak. Now, Samara Weaving is the young woman, and out of nowhere, she's being hunted, and then attempted to be sacrificed. This begins an exhilarating, violent, and creepy escape/chase/revenge story. Now, the visual world building of this, it's sparse. I mean, it takes place within a dense forest, and for whatever reason, the group that's living together have decided that holing up in the middle of the trees with then collected junk strung together to make a fortress wall is going to be the better idea than finding a housing community to shack up in. I mean, remember, the rapture took place, so at least some people are gone and have left their dwellings uninhabited. But the aesthetic makes this have a grim and post-apocalyptic feel to it. Filthy people, wearing rags and tattered clothing, living communally to stay alive. Now, there's a threat that lives within the forest, which is what Weaving's character of Azrael is being sacrificed to. The design of these is horrific and gnarly, and when we see these creatures in action, they're basically just after blood, and the way they go about extracting it is spectacularly captured with wonderful gore and a few gag-inducing moments that are just way too visceral and realistic looking too. I was loving the practical effects, the makeup, and the costuming of these creatures. We're kind of left to assume what they represent and how they continue to function, but without giving too much away, think of them as sort of zombies who aren't after eating brains. But also, they're more complex. They're not mindlessly just wandering around with a primal animal instinct to feed. These have processing capabilities, and that makes them not only more dangerous, but also way more unsettling. Weaving is great as ever, showcasing some good survival and fighting skills, but not coming across as some sort of martial arts expert. I mean, she just appears that she's honed her abilities through necessity, and then she employs them as needed. But she's not flawless, so mistakes make her believable as a heroine. Now, a lot in this movie asks us to make assumptions about what's going on, or more so, why things are going on. I mean, we're told through title screens about the rapture and then the choice to go mute. But the group of people that were shown, they have this priestess who looks like she calls the shots, but she's very ill-defined, and she's vague as to what her purpose is. There are some clues that were given about what's in play, but because the larger picture isn't showcased, either through title screens or through pantomime exposition, we're left with just guesses. Now, I appreciate how this story uses the lack of dialogue to draw us into the performances. Unlike that Joel Kinnaman movie Silent Night, which made everybody mute for zero reason other than gimmick, this one has a purpose, and I was intensely drawn into Weaving and her expressiveness. Sometimes she shows us abject terror, other times a deep sadness, and then there's the beautiful and bloody rage. Each of her emotional displays is palpable and effective. And without all of these, the story would be pretty lifeless. All of the other villagers or survivors or whatever you really want to call them, they're just stoic and dronish. I mean, occasionally they show some anger and frustration, maybe even sometimes a tiny bit of sadness. That's it. They're one-dimensional and then completely uninteresting. And even with Weaving as the driving force for any enjoyment or investment in the story, as a whole, the narrative is a simple chase and revenge tale that attempts to use religious mythology as its backbone. But it doesn't deliver anything memorable. I mean, all the way through, I was willing myself to love this movie. The energy and the urgency of the chase, it's exciting. The gore is wonderful, and it's not overdone. And then Weaving captures all of her emotions so we can understand what she's feeling at any moment. But it really comes down to the why. Why does this group want to sacrifice Azrael to begin with? Why does the priestess quietly paint on a wall with vague imagery? Then there are also a few whats that need to be addressed. I mean, what are the creatures attempting to do? Heck, even what are the creatures themselves? What are the villagers trying to accomplish? Or what are they waiting on? When the film concludes, we can make a leap about what transpired, but a glaring issue still surrounds Azrael in those final moments, and it's left up to everybody's interpretation. Now, that would be fine if we had foundational info that's throughout to help guide a guess on the meaning. But since we don't get that, the ending becomes hollow, even though it is exciting and harrowing all the way through. Overall, despite gruesome visuals and an urgent pursuit, Azrael fails to establish any impetus for connection other than providing us with a vulnerable lead. Weaving continues to rule as a scream queen and final girl, emoting without words while taking on vicious threats, leaving her coated in blood. The lack of background and supporting content creates a shallow and fleeting story, maintaining audience investment only until the credits roll, to be forgotten in minutes. The practical effects are expertly delivered, showcasing a unique take on once-alive humans, but gore and weaving aren't enough to distract from the lack of substance in the story, even though they do give it their best. There's no sex, nudity, or profanity, but a ton of gory violence. I give Azrael 2 out of 5 couches. And I was hoping for more, and I had really been excited to see this. What's a post-apocalyptic film that you love to watch? The Book of Eli, it's one of my favorites, but let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.